My name is James Harold. Welcome to my channel. Before I start, I want to say this clearly. This channel isn't about proving anything. It's about documenting experiences I've had growing up and what I've encountered while exploring the unexplained as an adult. Some of these experiences happened when I was young. Others are recent. All of them are real to me. I don't claim to have answers. I don't ask anyone to believe me. I'm here to share what I've seen, what I've felt, and what I've documented, and let you decide what you think. If you're skeptical, you're welcome here. If you've had experiences of your own, you're welcome too. This is simply a record of unexplained moments in my life. The Ballroom on the Hill, My Life in Glen Alice. Growing up, I didn't need a television to see something incredible. I just had to look out my bedroom window. We lived a few miles south of Rockwood in a place called Glen Alice. To most people, it was just a quiet spot on the map. But to me, it was a place where the world of the living and the world of the dead overlapped. Our house sat right beside the Glen Alice Cemetery, a sprawling field of history where the headstones stood like jagged teeth against the skyline. In that house, the night was never truly dark and the air was never truly still. The Neighbors in the Stones. The cemetery wasn't just a field, it was a gallery of the forgotten. Many of the tombstones were over 100 years old, their faces worn smooth by a century of Tennessee rain. Some were grand, towering obelisks draped in carved stone ivy, while others were tiny leaning markers for children, half swallowed by the earth. On summer days, they were just gray rocks, but at night, they became the stage for something else. I spent countless nights with my forehead pressed against the cool window pane, watching those stones. Out there, tiny orbs of light would appear, no bigger than a fist. They didn't move like flashlights or fireflies, they danced. They would hop from the top of a tall, century-old monument down to a flat, mossy marker, swirling around each other in weightless loops. They moved with a fluid grace, weaving through the rows as if they were navigating a crowded ballroom. I'd watch them for hours, captivated by their silent game of tag. To me, they weren't omens. They were the guardians of the hill, keeping the residents company in the deep dark. The Social Hour in the Woods. The voices were the soundtrack to this light show. It wasn't the sound of ghosts wailing, it was social. From my bed, I'd hear the low, steady murmur of conversation drifting through the walls. It sounded like a dinner party happening just out of reach. The rise and fall of a man's baritone, the soft melodic lilt of a woman's laugh, and the occasional muffled clink of what sounded like fine china. One night, the murmuring was so clear, so close I had to know more. I slipped out of bed, crept to the back door, and quietly eased it open. The cool night air hit me, thick with the scent of damp earth and old stone. I stood on the porch, barely breathing, and listened. The sounds were clearer out there, but also stranger. They weren't coming from any single direction. They were just in the air, a ghostly cocktail party with no host and no location. I quickly retreated back inside, the lock clicking shut behind me with a finality that did little to calm my racing heart. But then, the woods behind the cemetery would add their own layer to the night. While the cemetery felt peaceful, the woods felt ancient and unpredictable. Sometimes, a sound would tear through the conversational murmurs, a heavy rhythmic thudding like something massive was pacing the tree line, or a sudden sharp crack of a branch that sounded like a gunshot. Occasionally, a low, guttural vibration would hum through the air, a sound so deep you felt it in your chest more than you heard it in your ears. It was as if the woods were jealous of the lights in the graveyard, trying to remind us that not everything in the dark was friendly. The service at the old church. The centerpiece of it all was the old church. It sat there, gray and skeletal, with no power lines running to it and no reason to be lit. It's been torn down for years now, but back then, it still had a final job to do. On the darkest nights, when the voices were loudest and the lights were dancing their hardest, the church windows would suddenly begin to glow. It was a warm, flickering amber light, as if someone had stepped inside and lit 100 candles for a midnight service. There was no electricity, and the doors were locked tight, yet there it stood, a lighthouse for the souls on the hill. You could almost hear the phantom echoes of a choir if the wind hit the eaves just right. A place apart. I know how it sounds to people who didn't grow up there. They hear cemetery and voices and think of horror movies. But for me, Glen Alice was just home. It was a place where the past didn't stay buried, it stayed for a visit. The old church is gone now, and the woods have likely reclaimed those ancient leaning stones. But when I close my eyes, I can still see those lights dancing from grave to grave, and I can still hear the neighbors talking softly just outside my window.